3, 2, 1, go. Well, hello,
Howdy.
and welcome to Sparking Creativity, the Ethno Arts Podcast. I am your host, Trevor.
And I'm your other host, Justin. And we are happy to be with you today. We decided to change things up a little bit from our plans. I know you don't know what our plans were necessarily, but in light of all that's going on in the world right now, we had an interview that we did right at the first of the year that's just very timely for right now.
Yeah.
And that's talking about the ministry of trauma healing, trauma care, caring for people in different ways who are suffering and have difficulties.
Yeah, and for our purpose, using the arts, how local arts can be used in order to aid in that process.
This is a ministry that has been growing in different ways. There are many programs out there and courses addressing trauma, and some have artistic elements and expressions as part of them. And we have some ethno arts colleagues who are involved in teaching these kinds of courses and doing these trainings and helping communities to find their own meaningful expressions so that they can process grief or trauma or whatever it is and work through things, but also to train other people and helping the church to be a safe place for people who are struggling and dealing with different issues. And so the arts have a huge role to play and a lot of benefits in this, in helping in this process. And so we wanted to highlight that through this great conversation that we had.
Yeah, and we were just talking about this, and it's not unique to right now, but right now it kind of feels big in the world, and there's a lot going on from processing and coming out of not out of necessarily, but the times of COVID, a pandemic that has reached all the way around the globe, and in the midst of war and potential war, and just a lot of possibilities for trauma, and seeing people in the world going through trauma. We are just thinking about how much historically art has played a role in people's processing and creating beauty out of pain, out of suffering. And we wanted to talk about that. And we were talking about putting together an episode about arts that have come through COVID and the processing of all of that. And we will still get to that probably in season 2. But we wanted to talk about the basis of it first. So we're excited to hear from some of the experts and people who know way more about it than we do, who have, I've gone through training with them and have appreciated so much what they bring to the table and what they have taught me and have taught many, many other people in how trauma healing is necessary and how to approach it and how to use local arts in order to process those things. So we're looking forward to this interview. Anything else you'd like to say before we get started, Jay?
Just to know that we are splitting this interview up over 2 episodes, and this is how we're going to end out the season, one this month and one next month. And so today you're going to hear the introduction to our colleagues, Todd and Mary, and a special guest. Not that Todd and Mary aren't special, but a extra special guest to me is my wife, Beth, who will be sharing as well. So they will talk a little bit about who they are and just laying the groundwork for what trauma is, what's going on in people's hearts and minds and bodies, and how does it affect them? How can that how it can hinder or have barriers to engaging with messages like the gospel, um, or engaging with scripture, and just how the arts can play a role in helping them to work through things, and using expressions that are meaningful, and just what that does, like physically and in the brain, and all of the science behind that. And it's really fascinating to see how God has made our bodies to respond to difficult circumstances, and how that knowledge is being applied and used to help people work through really difficult things. So that's what we're going to hear today.
Yeah, this was a fantastic conversation, and we hope you love it as well, and it's helpful to you in whatever ministry you're involved in. So enjoy. Hello. It is
Hi.
so good to see all of you. Hi, Justin. We've got with us some special guests, some artsy smartsies today. We are excited to have you in the virtual room to hear what you have to say about this topic of arts and trauma healing. So we just want you to introduce yourselves, if you wouldn't mind. We've got Todd and Mary. If you wouldn't mind just doing a quick introduction on yourself.
Hi, I'm Mary.
And I'm Todd. And we were both started off in music therapy, music therapists, branched off into other creative arts therapy, then got into ethnomusicology, and now we do ethno arts, branching out into all different arts, and we work in Asia.
Very good. And we also have Beth with us. She's a very special guest. Who are you, Beth?
Hi, yeah. I have been trained as an art specialist, an ethno art specialist. And after coming alongside and being mentored under Todd and Mary, and working with arts and the healing process, I decided to go for an MA in expressive arts therapy, which, Lord willing, I'll be finishing this year. So, yeah, get to work alongside these wonderful folks and learn from and with them.
Very good. It is great having all three of you with us today, and we're excited to hear what you have to share.
So to start off, I should say in full disclosure that I know Beth because she is my bride. And I just want to make that known because I'm so proud. So first question to all of you. We just want to start with very basic, and help us all to understand what trauma is. What do you mean by that term? And then maybe you could share a little bit about the work and ministry that's going on in this domain.
So, trauma, initially, if we focus on just a painful event or an incident in our lives that's negative or hurtful to us, we can look at many different people and they can experience the very same incident, but come out of the incident at a different level of feelings or a different amount of pain, maybe no pain even from what they experienced. So different people respond to different situations in different ways. And as we look at that, we see that we have pain that some people have experienced and gone through. And then they might move from that pain into grief, a place where they need to really process the pain and move through reflecting on the experience, struggle through the difficulty of moving out towards a more positive feeling within themselves. Sometimes if people stay in grief for a while, they can also move into a deeper feeling of trauma, where there's a trigger that is from an experience or from a painful event that sets off inside of them a deep, deep terror or place of torment that they cannot find relief from. So these levels can be different for each person, where they land in looking at their pain or looking at their grief or moving into an area of trauma or traumatization. And so as we're looking at ministering in this area, we're seeing that there's a process that people need to go through. And actually, when we talk about arts in trauma healing, we really talk more about arts in the healing process, because it is a process of moving through our pain, looking at it, really looking at it, and moving through the traumatization and the grieving aspect, and looking straight on at the pain that we're experiencing, so that we can actually move towards healing. It takes time, it takes energy, and it takes support from the community around us.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything to add to that? Got a thumbs up. So as you're explaining, in basic terms what this is, I think that's really helpful. But we're wondering, like, what happens actually in someone's body and mind when experiencing trauma, when going through this process. What is happening in your body and mind?
Yeah, there are books and books and shelves of books written on this subject that I wish we could all dive in and swim around in together. But from what we all have been learning together and sharing with the folks we get to journey with, we can share a bit of that today. A major aspect of it is that our bodies and our brains encode traumatic memory or traumatic experience differently from our everyday life experiences. Say, for example, Trevor, you go to the store, you'll remember, I put my shoes on. Now, you don't have to think about all of this, of course, but you can easily tell me the story of going to Walmart from beginning to end with a clear, I did this, then I did this, then I did that. When someone undergoes a markedly frightful event where their will is overtaken either by a person, act of nature, so many different things can happen in this world we live in. God has put in us many different amazing survival adaptations that cause these types of memories to be encoded into our brains and bodies differently than, say, for example, your trip to the grocery store. Mm-hmm. So that means the part of our brain that helps us to form a clear declarative memory of a narrative of an event is actually turned down in efficiency. So is also our cause and effect thinking centers, they're right there behind your forehead, are also turned down in efficiency, so that our survival centers in the middle of our brain can turn up to full volume and get us to safety. That means that our body is then encoding our memories differently. Different parts of our brain are functioning differently in that frightening circumstance. And when our memories are encoded, when our brain is functioning in that specific way, our body tends to encode more, our brain and body tend to encode more sensory memories than they do narrative and declarative memories. So maybe we've all seen in different movies, people struggling, say, for example, being interviewed by an officer or something, asking someone to share what has happened to them. And the person seems quite foggy. It's not because they have a bad memory. It's because their body was functioning the way it was made to function. It was made to take in all the sensory input it needed to guide itself through the situation. So it remembers what's salient to survival, which is sensory input. So people may say things more instead of, well, I did this and then I did this and I did that. We may hear more things like, it was really cold out and it was quite dark. And I just remember this one image. I remember this sound and this smell every time I smell that smell. So that's how, so from your trip to the grocery store, unless all the meat just happens to be rotten on that day, you're probably not going to come home telling your family about all the different smells of the day or all the temperature in the grocery store. But if that had been an event that was quite frightening to you, if there had been some type of emergency that took place that day, the way you remembered that event would be quite differently. Does that make any sense? Does anyone have anything they'd like to add to that? And that's where you hear us talking about the arts with Todd and Mary's background in the creative arts therapies, and what's inspired my journey now, is that our bodies are holding these memories so strongly. For example, if one of us were to be triggered right now, we became suddenly quite frightened. We know we're frightened because why? We feel it in our bodies first, right? We feel it really strongly. And our bodies are such wonderful tools in the creative process. We use our voices to sing. We use our bodies to dance. We make rhythm with our bodies or with an instrument. And we can also tell stories and write songs and write poetry, which is bringing together those bodily senses and the more declarative narrative aspects of our brain that we need to bring more together to be able to recognize that we are now in the present. We're no longer in that living memory. We're in a different time. We're in now, just like I feel safe with you all now. And that's one way the arts are from my heart, why the arts are so vastly important to this work, because inviting only verbal processing of these overwhelming events might be difficult. Like Mary said, it's not difficult for everybody, right? But for some portion of the population, giving a verbal narrative account of their experience may initially just be too overwhelming and out of reach. So we can provide people options of meaningful art forms to begin stepping a toe into their experience and then back out. You can leave the art. You can walk away. You can put it in a box. You can hand it to someone stronger than you to hold, right? And we can find ways, as we get to work alongside all these wonderful people, ways of doing that that are especially meaningful to and for them.
I'm curious if you have just quick examples of the types of things maybe closer to your or our home culture that would make sense in how the arts have been able to help people, or types of art forms that people have used to process trauma, before we get into the discussion of local arts around the world. Are there some examples that just quick pop to your mind that you've seen? I know even just having a creative arts therapy background, what are some ways that would make sense to a lot of our listeners that you've seen or that you've heard of that have been really great examples of using the arts to go through that process of healing? Sorry, I went off script on this, but I was curious.
It's a great question, just to help people understand, relate to it better, and on a real practical level. Like just thinking about someone's thinking about their trauma, and maybe they have an opportunity to draw something. Just selecting a color, a certain color may represent more what they're feeling, so they can have that freedom to choose a color to begin drawing with, and then from there move on to shapes and patterns and action with their hand, how they actively use that hand and color to express how they're feeling. That's just really basic. You guys probably have a lot more to say about that.
I want to hear all about that. A memory that comes to mind for me, one time getting to work alongside Mary and Todd, one of our participants chose to craft a lament. That's one of the things we often work on together, and people are invited to choose their own situation and their own lived experience to communicate directly with the Lord and with the rest of us about. And this individual chose the history of racism in our country to lament as a person of color, and chose a song, a modern pop rap song that represented that struggle for her, and then choreographed a remarkable piece of dance. And we were able to gather around her, and she danced, and you could see in her body often the slumping of the shoulders and then the rising up really strongly as if there was a heavy weight. And as she moved through the piece, you could see the contraction of her body, the weight on her body, And as she moved through it, her body continued to get bigger and bigger and bigger and more powerful and more upright and making eye contact with her audience. So the arc of her experience she was sharing with us through her body, through her choice of song, through her willingness to allow us to witness that vulnerable, what could have been a very frightening and vulnerable moment for her, surrounded by people who didn't necessarily share her same lived experience, was a really, at least for me, I can't speak for her, but was a gift and a powerful thing to witness her working through her own lived experience through that art form.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I've got chills from that. I don't remember if it was specifically the training that I was at, but I remember a lot of those experiences where you went, oh, there's something really deep and healing going on here, and I'm witnessing that, and I'm not living it, but I'm witnessing that, and it's really powerful and really hope filled. So I appreciate those examples.
There's some benefits to the people that maybe haven't experienced that trauma, but can be able to see someone working through that and see that expression. There's so much encouragement, and I imagine like I'm sure there's a lot of careful work in those workshops or courses that you do that would allow people to feel comfortable to share and to be vulnerable like that. And I just think it's a beautiful expression for the wider body of Christ to have be in community with each other, not just having fun and lightheartedness, but really getting to go through the deeper, darker parts of life with each other. There's just something really special about that, I think.
I do want to say that we're not intimating that a one-off performance of any piece is completing anything for anyone. But like you're saying, our goal is to create a safe space for people to share these things and to feel a resonance from the people they're sharing it with, feeling witnessed, feeling believed, feeling honored. So as you look around, you see people swaying to the music with them, and it doesn't mean we've had the same experience, but we're entering that with her or with whatever performer or whoever is sharing their art in that sacred space, and like Mary has already mentioned, that we believe this is a process, and we can be creating little bitty things every day, big things to share. It doesn't matter, but little by little, these creations and receiving that empathic, caring witness is an important part of that journey. So I just wanted to make sure we said that we are under no impression that just, making one creative space is the end all be all, but it's having a practice of that in safe community that we really hope to begin fostering or begin kindling for this work.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know sometimes we like to look for the magic key or the one thing that we can do, or the 3 simple steps for whatever we're trying to accomplish. And I appreciate the emphasis on process. That it's one creation is just one step of that journey, and but then like the richness and beauty of the many creations in sequence and the story that tells, it could just be really powerful and to help. I wonder if you could circle back a little bit as we were talking about the body and the mind and what's going on. Many of our listeners are in some kind of ministry. They're serving communities in different ways, and how can being in, and you've touched on some of this already, but how can being in or have experienced different types of trauma hinder someone their ability to engage with these important Bible stories that people want to share with them, or to share about Jesus, or whatever the work might look like? How might they be affected, or the obstacles that could be in the way? And then back to the arts part, like how can you help try to address some of that so that they can be then more ready to engage with the message?
Well, as Beth was talking about it, just the effects of trauma on us, body and mind, and also spirit, if we add that in here to what Justin is asking about and pointing out to us. It's very difficult when our brains are not actually able to be present and actually able to process effectively. It's very difficult to embrace a truth from scripture and allow that to be like a resource for calming us or helping us meet the pain that we're experiencing. So there can be a huge barrier that comes up for people when they're traumatized or when they're grieving and experiencing so much pain. There's this barrier that happens where even though cognitively they might be able to say, this is a truth from scripture, I know I am loved by God, it might not really be something they can cognitively embrace because their emotional state is what is actually triggering and where they are moving from. So that's another area that arts can come in and meet that struggle for people instead of trying to continually feed this truth to them. We invite them to process it from more of the artistic, expressive side, to look at their pain. And as they do that, one benefit that can also happen is that they also have an opportunity to look at this truth in a new light from this new perspective, where it doesn't have to just start with a cognitive knowledge, but it can start with an experiential element that can make something of that truth more real for them. And again, it's a process, not just in a moment, but in and through the process. I don't know. Beth and Todd, what else might you add to that?
With what Mary's saying about, she's mentioned a lot coming alongside people, walking with people. And I remember reading, actually it's used in some of our coursework where we get to walk with people, Diane Langberg's book. And I remember her Suffering in the Heart of God. And there was just such a beautiful sentence she had in there. She said, if you want people to experience, especially pained people operating, like Mary's just shared, from this deep heart of pain or woundedness, she said, if you want them to experience the love of God and believe this, go be it to them. Mm-hmm. So we can, it's good, of course, for people to gather, for people to hear the word. And we, of course, support that. And maybe people also need to tangibly feel the love of God in their bodies, in their hearts, so that it can begin moving up toward belief. And we feel it by being in safe community with other people, where we're allowed to share our vulnerability and have it witnessed and be in that community right where we're at, wherever that woundedness might be. That's what, comes up to me.
This is just coming to mind now for me personally, and I'm not sure if this will make it into the podcast, but I'm thinking of, I think my assumptions coming into this discussion on trauma healing and how the arts can help have primarily focused on, if I'm a person who is experiencing that and trying to go through healing, how can I produce art in some way? And that's the experience. But I'm thinking a few weeks ago, I went to a performance. I saw a national tour of a Broadway show with my family, and I was just excited about it. But I was not expecting to basically be on the edge of tears for the entire first act, because of the power of the art form, because of the beauty of it. And it felt like I was going to therapy, in a sense, for something that I didn't even realize was stuck in my body. And it was just a beautiful experience. And so I'm thinking, is this a discussion that you have, if you're not to that point where you recognize something or you're ready to move on, that just experiencing art, whether that's, in a biblical form, in a church setting, in a community, I feel like that's really healing. And I think maybe I'm just trying to shift my own perspective and say sometimes art can be healing when the professionals do it, or when the people who, just the beauty of the art form can really open something up. Because I think it's fairly intimidating for a lot of people who wouldn't consider themselves artists to just jump right in there to, pick up that blue crayon, as you were saying. It might start with something simple, but if you feel inadequate, it seems to me like experiencing art that means something to you, or that looks familiar, or like home, or like childhood or something, can really trigger that, oh, I think I need to talk to someone, or I think I need to express something on my own privately, whatever it might be. That's just a shift that's happening in my brain as you were talking about this. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I just wanted to point that out to myself.
I want to know what the musical is that you went to see.
It's called Hades Town. It, it's unreal. I brought my daughters to it. It was their big Christmas present. We kept it a surprise until the day of. They have all the music memorized beforehand. We've listened to a lot of it based on old Greek mythology. The music is gorgeous. It was an experience. It was not religious. It was not Christian necessarily, but the messaging within it was just it's a tragedy, but it's cyclical, and it was just beautiful. And to hear the collective gasp of people at a moment that we all knew was coming, I literally heard everybody go at one point in the show and went, "Oh my goodness, we all knew this was coming. Like, this is an old story." But to experience that with people was just really powerful, and yeah, I still get emotional thinking about it.
It actually makes me think of, we had a conference where some of us acted out some of the book of Job, and of course a summary of, not the whole book, just a short summary. But there was someone in the room who said they had been through years of seminary and studied Job in depth and never quite got the meaning of Job as much as they did in a few moments of a dramatization of it. It just impacted them in a way that never could have, with all the logical, theological discussion and processing over years.
Yeah.
There's a reason we have two halves of our brains, two parts.
That's right.
I believe that wholeheartedly.
Mm-hmm.
Wholeheartedly.
Mm.
It stirs that, I don't know, that creative spirit in us, that being generative, pain and suffering can make us shrink and make us be small and turn inward. Whereas that generativity, that creativity, even just witnessing it kind of maybe can wake that up a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
Also, the music in Hades Town is phenomenal. It's set in New Orleans, right? Isn't it? It's all New Orleans
that's the style. Music. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, fantastic.
Nice.
Oh. It's amazing too how art, when we encounter something in a moment, because it does, we have this associational meaning too, or connection with an event or a moment, when art actually speaks to us or connects with us. And like you had at this musical, and it surprised you, but it shows the power of how it can grab you in a moment. And Ken Geyer calls that a window to the soul. When art kind of comes in and grabs us and opens up this window kind of inside of us, so we experience and encounter something beyond just words and regular normal life stuff. And I think that's the beauty too of when we start working through aspects of art, not not necessarily expecting a professional to do it for us. We just engage with it. We just try it. We just put ourselves into it and explore it. There are these windows of the soul that can open up for us and touch us in new ways, and have us actually, for many people, touch the heart of God too, because they see and experience him in this powerful and new way. I'm just thinking about when people I've worked with before, some of them have been very resistant to movement and doing dance or movement. Sure. And I was trained in movement therapy too. So I worked a lot in that area of movement and encouraging people to move. And people would often say, I'm absolutely not going to move, that you can't get me to move. It's not going to happen, but just the smallest movement of their body, just starting into it, and all of a sudden, like experiencing increasing freedom. And next thing you know, they're dancing around the room or dancing out some Bible verse or something that they want to express from their heart, or a prayer. And something starts to open up because they actually touch that opening within themselves, that creative part that Beth was talking about, that's in each of us, and just kind of being invited into opening that up. It really is like a window of the soul to just find that freedom.
Well, we hope you enjoyed the first half of that interview with Todd, Mary, and Beth. There was a lot more they had to say that we'll get to hear next time.
Yeah, next episode we're going to talk about how local arts in particular are important to the work in trauma healing, and as well as practical ways that you can use this information and just a little bit of knowledge to hopefully help in whatever circumstance you find yourself, as well as find out about some of the training opportunities that are available around the world. And we are just excited to hear the rest of this great conversation.
So we hope you will join us next time. And in the meantime, we encourage you to go and spark some creativity wherever you are, in your home, your family, or individually, and hope that it can be a blessing to you in these days ahead.
Bye.
See you next time. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. We would love to hear what you thought.
What resonated with you today? What questions did this raise? Anything you'd like to learn more about? Maybe you have stories you'd like to share.
Please feel free to contact us at ethnoartspod@gmail.com or follow us on Facebook and Instagram at ethnoartspod.
We also invite you to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on. This will help others to find out about the show. Please feel free to share the podcast with others.
We look forward to sharing more with you next time on Sparking Creativity, the Ethno Arts Podcast.